Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Deep Focus Show. I'm Clay.
I'm Aiden.
And what we usually do here is we usually rank directors. Sometimes we have a special series like on television, or Aiden has this series called Triumph Flops. That's a really cool one if you want to check it out. But today we're going to be ranking Paul Thomas Anderson films. If you've seen our first episode, you would know that he's one of my favorite directors of all time. I really love him. I've seen all of these films. Um, he's just something magical about his work. I really like it. What is your familiarity?
Well, if you'd seen that first episode, I think you'd also know that I hadn't seen any of his movies until now. So going in blind until today, and yep, put together a ranking of the 9 films based on just my initial thoughts, first watches for all of these. So maybe some things in the future I'll amend, but as of right now, this is where I'm at. So you want to start it,
Cool,
or
cool.
should I?
I'll go ahead and start. So Paul Thomas Anderson, he kind of blew up in the 90s with those other indie directors like Quentin Tarantino, Wes Anderson. Uh, just there was kind of a new movement in film, and I think he's definitely responsible for that. But the bottom film that I have is not from the 90s. It's early 2010s. You probably know what this is, Aiden, but it's Inherent Vice. First off, positives. Johnny Greenwood's score is fantastic. He's a Radiohead guitarist, and he works with PTA a lot in his later films. And of course, his PTA's visual flourishes in this movie, combined with Robert Elswit's stellar cinematography, they're just to die for. But I absolutely hate this movie. There's no plot. There's no driving story. I hate most of the characters except Owen Wilson. I thought he was fine. And I feel like this plot is supposed to intentionally be incoherent to match with the amount of drug use that Joaquin Phoenix character is doing. But I can't stand it. It's basically a drug crime story about a junkie PI taking place in the 1970s. It's just a sequence of loosely connected scenes that ultimately make no sense to me. Um, Maybe I don't get it, or maybe I'm not right with my opinion, but this is just a lame and pretentious wannabe art movie. And I don't have much else to say except I really don't want to ever watch it again. And I'm going 1.5 stars. I really hate it.
Well, I'm not talking about that movie right now, but I don't think it won't take long to get there. My very bottom movie is Licorice Pizza, his most recent film. And I think this is another one that is not a surprise to Clay, as it wasn't for me that he would have Inherent Vice at the bottom. I really hated this movie. I found the two main characters incredibly annoying. I thought the story was totally aimless, and I really don't like how he shoehorns in like the nostalgia of the 70s just with like pointless stuff like the David Bowie needle drop in the middle of the movie that doesn't even, serve any purpose. They just play the whole song Life on Mars. That was stupid. The first scene is okay, I guess. It's kind of all downhill from there. I was so bored. I had to pause it multiple times to get through it. It feels excruciatingly long. You could have told me it was 5 hours and I would have believed you. Um, yeah, I'm giving this 0.5. I hated this. I'm sorry. This was one
Jesus.
of the worst movies I've watched. I mean, it's better than like Inland Empire, but that's not saying much.
Better than Eraserhead, or no?
Eraserhead was 2. Eraserhead wasn't a 0.5. I gave Eraserhead way
Uh,
higher marks than this.
well, yeah, I did see that coming. But I'm not going to talk about that one yet. My next one is Hard Eight. Uh, this movie opens with a scene in a diner, and it was inspired by a short film of PTA's prior to this called Cigarettes and Coffee, or Coffee and Cigarettes, one of those. Philip Baker Hall is giving the performance of a lifetime here, I think, and I love the ambiguity and implications of the ending, but I don't know if this has the magic that you find in most PTA films. You can tell this was made with Boogie Nights in mind, especially with the music that's still featured in the film being taken from this. There's a lot of similar shots, but it just doesn't, it's definitely not up to par with that movie. But you can tell he has a passion for what he's filming here, and he's getting the job done. But the script is a little bit uneven. It jumps from place to place too much, and there's not much room for breath. And I also found Gwyneth Paltrow's character a little bit annoying. Um, but this is clearly a warm-up film for PTA. I don't think the film really ended up with his vision. Uh, I feel like it had some studio interference, which is a shame because this is his first film, going out in the scene. So, but I'm gonna go 3.5. I think it's a good debut and a much better debut than most films or most directors have. So I like it.
Yeah, I like that one too. I'm not going to talk about it just yet because my number eight, I'm pretty in agreement with you. Inherent Vice. I don't like this movie at all. I agree with almost everything you said. I find the narrative, it's like David Lynch in all of the worst ways. There's no story. It's just aimless nonsense for the most part. I feel bad because Joaquin Phoenix, I feel like he's not used well in this movie. It seems like Joaquin and Paul Thomas Anderson should be a slam dunk, but here it's just not. It's just a kind of a flop. And I get, I see what you were saying where it's like, oh, maybe it was like a dream fugue state type of movie on purpose. And it's like, okay, but like, I still don't like that. I mean, I find it just incoherent and just drug-addled nonsense for the most part. I'm going to mirror your score. I went a 1.5. It wasn't excruciating in the way that I found Licorice Pizza, but it also was not, I didn't like it at all. So 1.5.
Yeah, it's definitely not a pleasant watch. Wonder what you think about Joaquin Phoenix's other film with him, but I guess we'll see. Next up, I have Aiden's Bottom Licorice Pizza. Film received three nominations at the recent Academy Awards, including Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Original Screenplay. I don't think it won any awards though, which is a shame because I really like it. It's taken place in the San Fernando Valley again, in 1973. It's about navigating sort of like your first love. But there is a big age gap between the two lovers, so it really depends on where you land with that. It doesn't bother me too much, but it is kind of weird. Cooper Hoffman, Philip Seymour Hoffman's son, plays the 15-year-old, and he falls in love with Alana Haim of the band Haim. He falls in love with her character. I saw this in theaters like at a 10 a.m. showing because it was the only one that was available. But what stood out to me, unlike Aiden, I really do love the soundtrack here, and I thought the Life on Mars Needle Drop was pretty cool. And I love the color palette. It's a little bit grainy, and I think obviously Alana Haim's character, I really like her. She has a lot of sisters, kind of in the vein of Punch Drunk Love. His character had a lot of sisters too. So that's just kind of a continuing theme for PTA, I guess. And Cooper Hoffman plays sort of a hustler starting a waterbed business. And the two leads they meet after getting their picture taken at school. I love the Tom Waits scene. I thought that was pretty interesting. Benny Safdie is in here too. He plays a closeted mayor. I liked his character. And the best supporting character, bar none, is Bradley Cooper, who plays a real life character, and he is just a hoot in here. That's probably, I don't know, I'd reckon that's probably your favorite sequence right there whenever he came in, because
Yeah.
a lot of people liked his short screen time. He's only in it for like 10 minutes, but um kind of like Inherent Vice, the story is a little bit plotless. But a lot of the characters made me smile, and I do agree with you, Aiden, that the nostalgia aspects are kind of exaggerated in this film. And it's usually PTA is good at period pieces, but here it feels a little bit forced. Like I get it, this is the 1970s. But it's not incoherent like Inherent Vices. It's just a little bit plotless. But I'm giving it a light four because I really like the atmosphere of this film more than anything. Um, so yeah, I really like it.
Okay, everyone has their own opinion. My number seven, this is the last one that I'm going to say I don't like. So one third of them I would say I dislike, and the other two thirds I would say I like. The last one that I would say I don't like is going to be The Master. I don't like this movie at all, really. I'm sorry. I It's anchored by Joaquin Phoenix and Philip Seymour Hoffman, who I think are both amazing actors, but I think both of their characters are not given material. I don't find either of their characters particularly interesting. Joaquin Phoenix is playing this kind of traumatized World War II veteran, but I find his character, it's not sympathetic enough. He's too much of a psycho that I don't really relate to him as a lead character. He's too erratic and violent for him to really be a hero, but he's also kind of too weird and perverted to be a compelling anti-hero. I just think he's a mess of a character. Philip Seymour Hoffman, I think his character is a little better, but I do think it's kind of, I don't think it has as many dimensions as the movie thinks it does. I mean, he's clearly kind of an egomaniac. He's starting this cult, but I don't think his character has as many layers as the movie really thinks it does. And there's a lot of scenes that I just find annoying. I find the gratuitous sex in this movie way too much, ridiculous. Like the scene when Joaquin Phoenix is imagining all the women naked, it was totally pointless, had nothing to do with the rest of the film. Later on, the scene with Philip Seymour Hoffman's wife, which you know what I'm talking about, but what was that doing there? It didn't really explain anything about his character. Just kind of felt like PTA was just kind of riffing. And I one thing I do like about this movie, which was what kept it from the very bottom two, I really like the editing. I like that he goes for this kind of dream state, and I like the slow shots of the waves behind the boat that he keeps putting in that kind of act as punctuation to the scenes. That's one element I really like, but the rest of the movie kind of drew a blank for me. So I'm gonna go with a 2.5 out of 5 for this one. And this is the last one, as I said before, that I would say I don't like.
Well, that's a little surprising. I figured it would be another film.
Ooh,
I actually figured it'd be this film I'm about to talk about right now.
ooh.
My next one is Phantom Thread. This is Daniel Day-Lewis's final role. As of now, I don't know if he's going to continue to act or not, but what a way to go out. He plays Reynolds Woodcock, a fashion designer who makes dresses for royalty. Vicky Creeps, I don't know if I'm saying her name right. She plays kind of his creative muse called Alma Elson. And sure enough, they have a very unique relationship, to say the least. It's a little bit toxic, but Woodcock is so self-assured, he's controlling. There's a scene where he asks Alma not to move too much at breakfast. But Alma is kind of a sneaky woman. The pair conveys one of the most believably human toxic couples I've ever seen put to film. Um, I love the scene where, just the sequences where Daniel Day-Lewis is sizing her for the dress, especially after the initial dinner. Um, this is the most expensive film that PTA's ever made, if you can believe that. With all the costumes, you can kind of tell. And PTA is doing a lot of the cinematography here. Robert Elswit is not involved in this, but he does well. The colors are very bright and light, which juxtaposes with the sort of grim story, especially at the ending. But it's just a movie about two selfish people that we can still empathize with at the end of the day. Pacing is very slow, and I think it's a lovely period piece that's not set in San Fernando Valley for once. But I'm going 4.5 stars. I enjoy it. And yeah.
Alrighty. Yeah, I'm not talking about that one just yet. My number six, one you talked about, Hard Eight. That's going to be my number six. I am giving this a 3.5, same rating as you, I think. And the reason for that being, I really enjoy this film, but I can't help but feel that it's two-thirds of a movie. You know, it's kind of the first act and the second act. There's no conclusion. It just ends. And I find that very kind of unsatisfying. Obviously, the first big chunk is Philip Baker Hall taking John C. Reilly, who starts out as a homeless guy, and kind of teaching him the ropes of gambling. And then you get into this kind of romantic plot with Gwyneth Paltrow involved, who I don't, you know, she's not amazing in this, but I don't have a problem with her, I would say. And also Samuel L. Jackson is involved too. And without giving spoilers, I guess the film ends in this kind of violent fashion. But it doesn't, I find that it doesn't pay off kind of, there's no like conclusion to it. You know, it's kind of hard to explain. It feels like the first 70% of a movie. There's kind of a lot of the characters end the movie in the dark, and it mostly just feels like incomplete to me. Maybe part of that was the result of studio interference, but I do think there's there's a slickness to a lot of to PTA's early movies that I find in this that I do think kind of goes away on the more recent ones. But with this one, it's totally there. There's just something really great about the way he presents stuff. Things are very kind of kinetic in the way they're shot, and the characters are very interesting. So I go 3.5 because I think it's just at its core kind of not complete, but out of what is there, I think it's pretty strong.
Nice, nice. Did you prefer the first half or the second half?
Probably the first half. But
Thank you.
I think both were good. I just think the second half has more kind of structural problems in the way it's put together, the script.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Next one is Punch Drunk Love, early 2000s film, right after Magnolia. This one I think is the most unique film in his catalog. Adam Sandler plays Barry Egan, one of his first serious roles that he's played, and he does really well here. He's an unmarried entrepreneur. He runs a toilet clogging company. But he has huge social anxiety. He has many siblings, and the film opens with a piano that's just dropped off in front of his shop. And then he meets Lena Leonard, played by Emily Watson, who later becomes a love interest of his. I think the opening sequence is really gorgeous. It's kind of very dreamlike, and John Bryan has a score here, and there's like a neo psychedelia to it. You get great supporting characters like Lance, Barry's coworker, played by Luis Guzman. He was in Boogie Nights as well. Um, One of the best scenes in this film is where Barry goes to a party with his sisters, and he just rage sweeps over him and he smashes the windows. I love that scene. But poor guy has it rough. He's calling people for sex. He's collecting food bonus points for like airline travel points, which later becomes a running gag as he tries to keep that a secret. And then, of course, the sex calls get out of hand, and you meet Philip Seymour Hoffman, who's also really funny in this. But the movie, if you take his movies and put them on a scale of seriousness to silliness, this would be far to the latter's end. But it still manages to have a huge technical mastery, and the cinematography is so light, and I really love the use of blocking in this film. Like whenever Barry gets nervous, he kind of just like backs up, just little details like that. But this movie cracks me up, and it's totally rewatchable, and it's my first 5-star film.
Nice. So yeah, I'm talk about that at some point, but my number 5 at the middle spot, going with Phantom Thread, as you said, Daniel Day-Lewis's final film. And I really like this one because it depicts this kind of toxic relationship, and I think a more realistic way than a lot of other movies would. It's kind of symbiotic between the two of them, and you kind of see how it starts from kind of a more innocent place and then goes very dark at the end. But I like all the twists and turns. I really like uh Reynolds Woodcock, his character, because I think in the hands of another actor, he would be kind of inexplicable. He would just be kind of like mean for no reason. With Day-Lewis, he makes it kind of easy to see why he's this way and to kind of empathize with his kind of perfectionist, kind of autocratic nature. Um, and yeah, so I enjoyed that, and I enjoy a lot of the scenes where he kind of you see his kind of like OCD on full display. And of course, without giving anything away, the ending spectacular. And I really like the shooting of it. You know, it's very warm looking. You know, it's got that going for it. But I'm keeping it at 3.5 because I think it's a little slow paced for my tastes. It's just kind of slow from scene to scene, even though I like all the pieces. You know, it's just for me a little slow in the pacing department. But I think it's still very strong, and that's going to be my last 3.5. So
Nice, nice. Yeah, it's quite a slow film. It's not for everybody, but the ending really does pay off. So my next one is one you've already talked about. You didn't like it. The Master. That's my number four. Tells the story of Freddie Queel, played by Joaquin Phoenix. He's a World War II Navy veteran struggling to adjust in a post-war society. He meets Lancaster Dodd, played by Philip Seymour Hoffman. He's kind of a cult leader for this cult known as the Cause. I wonder if he took inspiration from working with Tom Cruise in making this film, because there's a lot of Scientology esque references here. But Freddie Queel, he's kind of an angry fellow at times, and he can make killer moonshine. Best scene in this movie, bar none, is the processing scene when Lancaster interviews him and he asks him not to blink his eyes, and uh, Freddie Queel is just this long sequence of dialogue, and it's great. It affects me in incomprehensible ways. It's just such a unique scene. Philip Seymour Hoffman, I think he's perfect. He's the right level of wit and rage. He's charming and proclaims to be smart, but you understand clear that how he started this cult. He compliments Joaquin Phoenix like so well in every scene. Freddie feels like he's out of touch a little bit, stumbling around in this film, but it feels like he's never fully aware of what he's doing because he can be really unhinged at times. But yeah, I mean, just that processing scene alone proves that Joaquin is arguably one of the best actors of our generation. And no pun intended, but this movie is a masterpiece. So 5 out of 5.
I mean, I think you make a fair case for it as a 5 out of 5. I just don't think I liked it.
That's
But
fair.
well, I wanted to ask you about that movie. What do you think the significance is at the end of him when he has sex with that lady and then repeats all the questions Lancaster Dodd asked him? Like, what do you think the significance of that ending was?
Oh man, I don't know. Just one of the main reasons I like that film is because of the atmosphere. It's uh maybe there's no significance because PTA was very much making movies that were kind of plotless around this time. So,
Yeah, I was just wondering
but
if you had an interpretation. Um, but I can. My number four is going to be Punch Drunk Love. I enjoyed this one. I think PTA said he wanted to make something totally different after Magnolia, so he made like a 90-minute, romantic comedy kind of movie with Adam Sandler, who I think Adam Sandler does a really great job in this movie, doing a much more dramatic role. I really like him. I've seen it speculated that he kind of in this role he's playing someone who suffers from like Asperger's or some kind of learning disability. But I really like his performance. It's kind of subtle in a way that I think you don't really expect from him. I also really I like the story and how it balances humor with kind of genuine emotion. Like it's obviously funny in certain scenes when he like in the scene you were talking about where he visits his sisters and like trashes the place. Like it's kind of funny on one level, but on another, you do feel the emotion of the character. Um, and I like kind of the way it's edited again, like kind of like The Master. It's got that dreamlike editing style. And I like, as you mentioned, Philip Seymour Hoffman in this. So all in all, just a pretty strong movie all around. I'm gonna keep it at a 4 out of 5 for now, but I think it could go up on another viewing. So that's gonna be my number 4.
It's a short watch too, so
Yeah.
it's pretty good. The next one I'm talking about isn't very short at all. I got Magnolia as my number 3. Right from the opening, you know exactly how convoluted this movie is going to be. It opens with 3 unrelated stories of deaths under synchronistic circumstances. It's crazy. There's well over 10 main characters in this movie. You get Tom Cruise, who plays Frank Mackey. He's a self-help guru who advocates for taming the cunt. His father is dying, who is he's played by Jason Robards, and he's in the care of Philip Seymour Hoffman, who plays Phil. Philip Baker Hall plays Jimmy Gator. He's the father of Claudia Gator, who's played by Melora Walters. And he's sort of a game show host. You get John C. Riley here. He's playing the cop, and then it's just this cast is stacked. It's a lot to talk about. I like William H. Macy's character too. He's a former quiz show contestant. He's obsessed with getting braces. But the soundtrack here, it's pretty great. It's provided by Amy Mann, and you get some good song cuts like Goodbye Stranger. The use of pans in this movie is fantastic. It's just every story weaves together so seamlessly. I guess you can call it a hyperlink film, probably one of the first. But it's like watching a complex web, but once it's done, it's so symmetrical. Um, and the ending really surprises you. Like, uh, it's so crazy. But it's well worth the payoff. It's 5 stars, so yeah, I really like it.
Well, I know you predicted Magnolia would kind of be in the middle for me, but I haven't talked about it yet. And I'm not going to because my number 3 is going to be Boogie Nights. The film, maybe one of them that put him on the map, really, his first really acclaimed one. And it's pretty perfect across the board. I just have a couple minor problems with it. But first of all, I will say I love the acting in this. Um, you know, Mark Wahlberg, Philip Seymour Hoffman's in it, Julianne Moore, Burt Reynolds, just a Don Cheadle, just a lot of great acting across the board. John C. Riley too. And I think all of them really bring their A game. I appreciate how it's this kind of epic story, and I think I think that's the type of movies I like the most from Paul Thomas Anderson are as kind of sprawling epics. I think that's something he really excels in. Um, not to say he doesn't have skill when it comes to smaller stories, but I really enjoy his more grandiose films, I guess. I would just say kind of I only have a couple of things with this movie that keep it at a 4.5 as opposed to a 5. One of which is that I'm not huge on the God Only Knows needle drop. It's a song I love, but I feel like it doesn't have much of a point in the movie, kind of. And maybe it kind of annoys me because it's a song I love so much. And I would rather, if it was in a movie, I feel like it definitely belongs there. I don't really know why it's here. The second thing is, I feel like it's kind of a little debauched in the subject matter, too kind of sexual for me. I prefer cleaner movies, I guess. And I get, obviously, if you're telling a story about like the porn industry, it's not going to be PG clean. But it's just not as much for me. But that being said, it executes its subject matter well. And there's a good balance, as I said before, with Punch Drunk Love of the humor, with also the genuine emotion of how it's like hard for people in this industry to find work, but at the same time, the porn parodies and all that crazy stuff in the era of VHS, they get good humor out of that. Um, and that's all fun. So it ultimately strikes a balance between fun and emotion. The running time is scary at first, but I think it earns it. It merits its length. So yeah, 4.5. And my last 4.5.
Nice, nice. Yeah, that's my number two. Boogie Nights. I think it's damn perfect. All the characters are flawless. It's his magnum opus, one of his magnum opuses. Um, and I think it's a film that best portrays the San Fernando Valley that he's so good at. It's based on his 1988 short, The Dirk Diggler Story. Obviously, it's not PG clean, like you said, it's about the pornography industry. But this movie put Mark Wahlberg on the map, and his character is one of my favorite characters put to screen. Burt Reynolds, he's great here. He plays Jack. He's the guy pulling all the strings on the porn films. Love the supporting characters here too, like Buck, played by Don Cheadle. Like his cowboy essence, you wouldn't expect that from a character like him. He's definitely the most benevolent character in this group because he's kind of a mild-mannered gentleman. And we never see him become like cocaine addicted like Dirk. But the scene, I like Dirk. I like his character. I love the scene where he first arrives at Jack's house and his conversation with Reed, John C. Riley's character. If he works out, that's great. There's a party scene that happens in 1980. Uh, and William H. Macy, he just kind of goes fucking nuts and he goes on a shooting spree. Um, I like I like the porn parody movies that they're doing. I like the kung fu moves that Dirk has, especially in the mirror. But yeah, after the 1980 party scene, things just go completely nuts. There's this really, really great scene of Jack taking a roller girl, played by Heather Graham, in the car, and that's coupled with the scene where Dirk is, you know, um, giving this other guy a hand job, and then he gets wiped out by a bunch of homophobes. Yeah, and just the final act is my favorite. You can definitely tell that the movie Babylon ripped that off. Like, that scene where they're dealing drugs and you get three great needle drops: Sister Christian, Jesse's Girl, and 99 Love Balloons. It's one of my favorite scenes, and I love that you don't really see his cock until the very end of the film. So it's 5 stars for me. I just love this film. It's not my favorite though, so you could probably guess what that is.
I was 50-50 on you mentioning Babylon at some point in this episode, but you found a way. Which I think we'll be doing Chazelle at some point in the near future. So
Yeah.
stay tuned for that when we do him, and Clay gets an opportunity to spend, I guess, 60% of his talking time talking about Babylon. Um, but my number two, I'm gonna go with Magnolia, and it's gonna be 5 stars. Echoing a lot of what you said, I love the idea of doing this interconnected web between all the characters. It's so ambitious. You have so many different stories interlocking. On Wikipedia, there's like a tree map that shows the relationships between all the different characters, and it's so complicated. Like there's so many lines, and but I think there are kind of consistent themes that tie it together and turn it from just being kind of like this anthology film. Like one of the consistent themes, I think, is the kind of mistreatment of children by their parents and all of that, and also kind of exploitation. And I think the ending is interesting to me. I like that the only character who isn't shocked by the frogs falling from the sky is the child character, because it's kind of like he sees the truth. He hasn't been corrupted by adulthood in the way that the adult characters have. So in that sense, maybe it's kind of a Peter Pan story in the themes. Um, but I just really enjoyed it. I like the kind of eccentricities of all the different characters. You've got William H. Macy, you've got Tom Cruise as the proto incel guy. I really like Philip Seymour Hoffman. There's a really great scene between Hoffman and Cruise where you get a sense of their different characters just in the physicalities. Cruise is all tense. Hoffman is kind of recoiling, kind of afraid of his Cruise's kind of manic energy. There's great acting throughout. I really like John C. Riley. I like his story, the way he kind of redeems himself at the end with William H. Macy's character. Um, and at first, again, I was, worried by the runtime, but I think it's such a it's such a poignant film and the way it weaves things together. It could be even longer and it would probably still keep my interest. I also really love the opening, as you mentioned, the kind of mentioning the stories and saying that are all serendipitous in the sense that all of them seem very unlikely. And the fact that it's not directly related to the meat of the movie, but it is kind of thematically linked to it. I enjoy that. It's a clever way to open a movie with a kind of parable without it being super saccharine or obvious. It's a very smart choice. And just overall, the movie is I like the soundtrack too, Amy Mann, as you mentioned, and the way the music comes in is very creative at points, like when I forget the actress's name when she's playing the music really loud when John C. Riley comes in and he kind of uh and it's kind of she's hiding the drugs and all that scene. So yeah, just a very excellent movie. And one that I really should watch again. Yeah, 5 stars.
Cool. The pacing on Magnolia is great. And I wanted to say that Boogie Nights and Magnolia, you can easily switch those two for me, because they're pretty much neck and neck. But I got the same number one as you. There Will Be Blood. Movie is fantastic. It's so damn good. It's probably my favorite film of all time, next to Synecdoche, New York, or around that. Or it's either that or Synecdoche, New York. It opens with a long take of Daniel Plainview, played by Daniel Day-Lewis. Yeah, man, what an epic character. He's just it's so great. The music in this film, it's impeccable. First with Johnny Greenwood, that he contributed to a PTA film, and just Daniel Plainview. What a mesmerizing and incredible character. He's a businessman. He's a showman. He's a deeply corrupted individual who stopped at nothing to get what he wants, even at the expense of others. The second he speaks for this in this film for the first time alone, he has like a level of gravel and roughness that portrays the horrors this man may have in him, and he just dominates and rips apart most of the scenes he is in this film. And like it's amazing. The beautiful desert landscape is captivating. First with cinematographer Robert Elswit. It's unlike any of PTA's films before this. It's his first basically like period piece aside from Boogie Nights. And you can tell that you're in a completely new subtle territory with this film. The imagery is spellbinding with the mountainous terrain and the gritty, fiery oil. Um, it feels incredibly modern, but it's not set in present day. The movie speaks for itself. Like even moments of no dialogue, it doesn't feel boring or slow or anything. It's fantastic, and it has one of my favorite monologues ever in a film at the end. Just wonderful movie. It's my favorite PTA film and my favorite of all time. And I'm curious if you like it more than No Country for Old Men, because that those were the two Western movies that pretty much dominated the Oscars that year. But this, for me, just it's groundbreaking, and the movie just speaks for itself. You gotta watch it.
Yeah, I agree with that. Well, I haven't seen No Country for Old Men, but when I see it, I will give you my report on which one I prefer. But for me, this one is totally perfect, echoing a lot of what you said. Um, Daniel Plainview, played by Daniel Day-Lewis, is just amazing. Amazing character. It's so gripping, kind of, and the way his relationship with his son is so interesting. The way you see his morality change across the film, his relationship with his quote unquote brother is very interesting. All of that with the two Paul Dano characters, who he's another amazing part of this movie, the dual role playing the twins. Um, and I really enjoy this as kind of just a study in avarice and in obsession and in all of those themes that make such meaty movies when given to a character like this. Just like you, I love the ending. It's shockingly brutal, which I wasn't expecting, and combined with a true cynicism, he ends the movie totally broken, estranged from his son, and the depiction of the oil in this as just it's so visceral in a lot of the scenes, depicting the violence of digging for it, how unsafe it is, how easy it is to get your neck snapped in the mine, all that stuff. It's you really get a sense of the cost of the demand for this for the black gold, as they say. Um, and because of all that, I have to go with it being my number one. It's got too many amazing scenes to mention, and it really feels like this is the one that, like, I was kind of debating Magnolia 5 star, but this one there was no debate; it had to be 5 star. Just totally great, amazing, and definitely one of the best of the 2000s. Probably wouldn't be in like my all-time top 10, but it is amazing. It's hard to really dispute that. And in a career full of great performances, maybe this is Daniel Day-Lewis's best ever. I'd have to really think about it because he's been in so many perfect movies, but of them, this is definitely a highlight in a career of highlights. And he's matched with amazing other actors. And one thing I would say is, I think this movie is kind of a lot like Killers of the Flower Moon, which came out this year. It's got that oil theme, the theme of greed and of a great tragic fall in a sense. And this is better, I would say, even though I also do love Killers of the Flower Moon a great deal. But so yeah, for me, number one, it's going to be There Will Be Blood. We line up there and we had the same top three. So pretty in alignment this episode, I guess.
Oh yeah, what a fitting title for that movie because
Yeah.
blood was definitely delivered. Um,
Well, I think the
I
book
still
it's
got to see
based
New
on.
York, New York.
Oh yeah.
Oh, there's a
The book it's based on is just called Oil. So they changed the title for the movie. But probably for the best,
that's
but
interesting.
Oil's a good title too, I guess. But not as I don't think as iconic as bringing up the blood and that kind of thing. Um, so yeah, definitely pretty great. Any closing thoughts on PTA you want to bring up?
I'm just glad we did this. I wish Tavi was here to give us his ranking, but maybe next time. Yeah, I love his films. And I think next we're thinking about doing Martin Scorsese. We've been thinking about doing that for a while, but that'll probably come
Yeah.
either in February or March.
Yep. A
We'll
lot of
see.
movies,
We'll
a lot of
see.
movies to hack through there. So not shocking. It might be a
Yeah.
little bit, but Happy New Year, everybody. This will be our last episode of 2023. And, we did a lot of stuff this year. So hopefully you liked some of it. I don't know.
Our next episode most likely will be Steven Spielberg,
As
probably.
next. Yeah, probably another installment in the Spielberg series. So again, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for sticking with us through season 2 of the Deep Focus Show, and we will see you next year.
Bye.